morning, everyone. How are you guys? Are you feeling good? Well, this is Group 12, and today we are going to talk about operating lease on the part of the lessor.
Folks, welcome to accounting, the department where everybody counts.
First up are our objectives for this discussion. Number one, to understand lessor accounting under the new lease standard. Second is to define an operating lease and a finance lease. Third is to identify the criteria in determining a finance lease on the part of the lessor. And lastly is to know the recognition of an operating lease on the part of the lessor. But before we will delve into the proper discussion, allow me first to introduce our group. Speaking right now is Pretty Orange Dignos Pilayo, saying, hindi porket nag-I love you, mahal ka na. Hindi porket nag-I miss you, miss ka na. Hindi porket sinabing di kita iiwan, hindi talaga. Parang financial statement, hindi porket balance, tama na.
This is Miss Bernlyn saying, ng love ay parang building and equipment lang po yan. Although long term, nagde-depreciate pa rin yan.
And I am Evangeline Aureo, reminding you na, i-recognize mo lang pag nasa sayo na.
Okay? Those are just energizers, yes ha? Para sa di mo maboard ha, sa atong discussion. So now, let's begin. What we will be discussing today is operating lease on the part of the lessor. But of course, we will also discuss the general view of lessor accounting. Also, atong tan-awon if naabay difference between the PFRS 16 and PAS 17 in terms of lessor accounting. Because, di ba, dito sa accounting for lessee, I believe gidiscuss ni sa previous reporters, di ba dito dili na ta magpili og model, kundi ang gamito nato jud is the finance lease model, unless it will qualify sa two optional exceptions wherein pwede ka maka-use sa operating lease model. Well, the default man good is finance lease. Now, we will see if here in lessor accounting, mao ba sad ang gisulti sa standard. So, for you to have a guide, among gi-break down ang discussion, and here are the topics na atong hisgutan. So, we have lessor accounting in general, leasing of land and building, operating lease, of course, the part of the lessor, plus illustration, and then the application, and the summary. So, we will start first here in lessor accounting. Meaning, kung unsay paagi sa pag-account ni lessor. Well, I guess there's no need for me to explain pa kung unsa ning lease since this was already introduced to us, right? Now, the first thing that we need to remember is this one. Kaning note. In terms of lessor accounting, okay, katong nagpaabang, katong nag-transfer og right sa lessee, ang giingon daw sa provision sa PFRS 16 ug sa PAS 17 are almost the same. And if you notice, na nakabutang ari nga, business as usual. Nganong business as usual? Because, unlike sa lessee accounting wherein you are not given an option on which model you will use, kumbaga by default, di ba? By default, finance lease jud imong gamiton, wherein you recognize right of use asset and then you recognize lease liability as well. Here in lessor accounting, this is business as usual because you can choose gihapon on what model you will use. And why is it business as usual? Because no matter ang model nga imong gi-choose whether or not there is a transfer of ownership or whether it is just an ordinary rent or na ay transfer of ownership at the end of the lease term. So, maong business as usual siya because atong gitan-aw kung in reality naa ba dyoy nahitabo nga sale in the form of rent to own or it is just an ordinary rental wherein you are purely earning rental income. Okay? So, mo na yung pasabot. Again, there's no big difference between PFRS 16 and PAS 17, yung old provision, in terms of lessor accounting, unlike sa lease under lessee. So I guess that's clear. Next, in terms pod sa pag-classify on what model to use, whether operating lease ba siya or finance lease, is a matter of substance over form. Okay? So, what does this mean? Well, dito sa contract, dito sa form sa contract, katong iyang legal form, there are instances manggod wherein lahi ang substance sa form. For example, ako ug si Ate Bern, we entered into a contract of lease. Hence, we made an agreement. Now, in our agreement, ang nakastated to is, it is just an ordinary rent. While in fact, ang nahitabo jud is rent-to-own agreement, in which gipalit jud ni lessee kang lessor ang property at the end of the lease term. Therefore, na jud nahitabo nga transfer of ownership. That's why our judgment should be a matter of substance over form. Because naay instances manggod nga ang gimean gyud sa contract is lahi versus sa kung unsay nakastate sa iyang form. So here, what we will follow is ang substance. Okay? Kung unsa gyud ang gimean, kung unsa gyud ang intention sa both parties. Thus, in classifying whether it is an operating lease or a finance lease, atong sundon is ang substance over form. Another thing is, di ba mo ana ta nga, if operating lease, it is just an ordinary rent on the part of the lessor. Because again, what he is expecting is purely rental income raman. So that's operating lease. However, sa finance lease, basically, ato siyang i-classify as finance lease because ang hitabo lagi, murag rent to own iyang dating. So, gipalit siya in the form of installment payment from the lessee to the lessor. But don't worry, because I will discuss it later kung what are the criteria in order for us to know that it is really a finance lease in general. And then, under finance lease on the part of the lessor is naatay classify whether direct finance lease siya or sales type lease. Okay? However, disregard that for now since madiscuss man ni siya sa succeeding groups. What's important is kahibaw ta that mao na siya ang duha ka classification under finance lease. But for now, let us focus first in general, when can we say or when can we classify that the lease is a finance lease? So, unsaon man di ay nato pagkahibaw if it is an operating lease or a finance lease? Because di ba, ang sundo nato is substance over form. Stated in here, any of the following criteria. So if ever na ay mo fall bisag asa dira, kaning 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? If naay mo fall bisag asa dira sa 1, 2, 3, 4, we can classify it as sa ganito, finance lease. Okay? Not operating lease. Now, atong tagsa-tagsaon. First is there will be a transfer of ownership to the lessee at the end of the lease term. And when we say transfer of ownership, meaning na sales, di ba? It's just that ang nahitabo is on installment basis and ang arrangement is rent to own. Therefore, meaning di ay, when there is transfer of ownership, our classification should be finance lease. Okay? Sa lessor accounting. Number 2, dapat si lessee gitagaan ni lessor og option to purchase. So, murag, ig-end sa lease term, si lessee, na siya'y option whether ganahan ba siya nga palito na lang ang asset or dili ra. Thus, if there is a purchase option, pwede na to siya maklasify as finance lease. Pero, we have annotation here about this lessee has an option to purchase the asset. Number 1, the price substantially, okay? Ang price daw ha, katong option to purchase, katong time nga gitagaan kag chance na mapalit ang asset. The price is substantially lower than the fair value at the date the option is exercisable. Okay. So here, we can clearly see nga mas ubos ang price sa option to purchase versus a fair value at the date the option is exercisable. Ano man? Because si lessee, di ba nagbayad na biya siya nimo in the form of rent to own. Then at the end, gitagaan nimo siya purchase option. So of course, mas ubos jud iyang ibayad ani. Then also stated here, number 2, nga at the inception of the lease, it is reasonably certain that the option will be exercised. Okay? Reasonably certain. Before we proceed with this statement, I have something to explain first. Because here mong good sa lessor accounting. Langas kay sa mo. Sorry for all the background noises because di jud malikayan, no? We'll just focus on the discussion. Please ignore and disregard those noises lang. Okay? So, to continue, before mo proceed sa kana nga statement, okay? I have something to explain usa because diri mo gud sa lessor accounting na atay 2 important dates. If you notice, na-mention ang gitawag na to og inception of the lease. Okay? So what para emphasize? Inception of the lease. And then, naasad tayo makita nga commencement of the lease. Now, in layman's terms, both terms are somewhat similar in meaning. Because kaning inception, sa Bisaya pa, this means sa sinugdanan. Same as commencement. Sinugdanan. Kana bitawng na closing ceremony, di ba? Moana man ang MC nga, okay, so before we will commence our program, so meaning, sinugdanan or sa pagsugod, jud. Kaning giingon nga commencement of the lease and inception of the lease, basically, Same date jud ni sila. However, there are instances that the two will differ. So, unsa ni nga instances? Let's explain it first. When we say inception of the lease, meaning it is the earlier date between nag-agree ang both parties, si lessor and si lessee, sa provision sa lease, and when gisunod na jud sa parties ang agreement. Now, here sa inception of the lease, atong i-classify under lessor accounting, di ba? Whether it is an operating lease or finance lease. So, there, adto dito mahitabo ang classification. At the inception of the lease and not at the commencement of the lease. Now, when we say commencement of lease, this is a time wherein si lessee is naka-obtain na siya og right from the lessor na pwede na niya gamiton ang underlying asset or katong iyang abangan. That's why if makabantay mo ato sa lease accounting, ang pirmi ma-mention is ang commencement of the lease, in which ang katong commencement of the lease adto siya mag-recognize og debit, right of use asset, and credit lease liability. Now the question is, nganong at the commencement man? Nganong dili man at the inception? Well, because, as what I stated earlier, at the commencement, the lessor already transfers a right to the lessee for him to use the underlying asset. Mao bitaw nga nag-recognize siya adto og right of use asset, di ba? Unlike sa inception of the lease, diri man gud ang parties nag-agree pa dito sa lease agreement. At the same time, this is also the moment when i-classify nato siya whether it is an operating lease or finance lease. Okay? Another thing is katong valuation anhi nato i-determine. So, basically, that's the difference between these two, kaning inception and commencement of the lease. If mo-mention nga lahi-lahi sila date, pero if same ra sila, we don't have any problem for that. Kung maglahi sila, mo na to nga, mugawas na ilang difference when it comes to accounting. Now, what was mentioned here is inception of the lease. At the inception of the lease, it is reasonably certain that the option will be exercised. Meaning, katong time nga nag-agree ang parties, di ba? It is reasonably certain that the option will be exercised. So, meaning, igabot sa, let's say, si Ate Bern o ako gihapon. We entered into a contract of lease. Now, igabot sa lease term, gitagaan ako siya option to purchase. If iyaha jud tong i-exercise ang katong option, so reasonably certain, so i-classify na to ang lease as finance lease. Okay? So remember nga ang gi-state diha is inception of the lease. Moving on, number 3, the lease term is a major part of the asset's economic life, even title is not transferred. Because si number 1, na i-transfer of ownership, diba? Si number 2 pod, reasonably certain nga i-exercise niya ang purchase option. So, paliton dyan niya. So, still na i-transfer of ownership. But here, although there is no transfer of title or passing of title, by the mere fact nga major part of the asset's economic life. So, unsa ning pasabot aning major part of the asset's economic life? Well, I will explain this first para to masabtan. So, di ba? Natay gitawag og useful life nasa tay economic life. Now, what's the difference between the two? When you say useful life, literally, we use it for property, plant, and equipment, and also investment property. Well, this is the period or the life of the asset nga useful pa siya sa ato. Not necessarily nga mo-produce siya economic benefits, but pwede nga nagamit nato siya even though dili na ta certain or dili na ta ka-determine whether naa pa tay economic benefit nga makuha. Unlike sa economic life, mao ganing from the term itself, economic life, because that's the period or duration that our asset is napay silbi sa ato in giving economic benefits. In simple terms, maka-generate patag income out of it. That's economic life. Now, what was mentioned here is not useful life, but economic life. Okay? Economic life. And stated here, ang lease term, meaning, ang gitas-on sa period nga giabangan ang asset is a major part of the asset's economic life. Now, when can we say nga major part na siya sa economic life? Well, as stated, under PFRS 16, the same with PAS 17, no clear-cut what is substantial. So, walay gi-provide nga threshold. With that, mo refer ta sa US GAAP, the next accounting standard, the generally accepted accounting principles. Ang giingon diri is at least 75% of the economic life of the lease term. To understand it more, let's say nakoy negosyo ng restaurant and I need land to commence my business. Now si Evangeline, na siya gipaabangan nako so niabang ko. Let's say the land has an economic life of 10 years. Okay? 10 years. Now, 75% of 10, that's 7.5 years or 7 years and 5 months. Now, if ang akong pag-abang ka Evangeline is pinakaubos or minimum 7.5 years, so halos ako na nakinabang sa asset, diba? So if inana, dili na nimo siya consider nga operating lease. Rather, finance lease na. Because, murag mahog nga, yes, Evangeline bitaw ang lessor, and ang tag-iya sa property, and then, di ba nag-expect siya nga, for 10 years na siya makuha ang economic benefit. But, of course, iya man tong gipaabangan nako. Then, ang lease term, dugay kaayo. 7.5 years. Almost close na sa economic life na 10 years. Nga murag, ako na nipalit. Ako na tag-iya. Because ako say nakinabang for a very long time. So if inana, you can classify it as finance lease. Thus, you will use finance lease model in terms of lessor accounting. Okay? So, napadjod, number 4. Kato daw giingon nga present value of lease payment. I believe na-mention ni sa lease accounting. Mao ni siya ang present value sa bayaran ni lessee sa imo. Now, stated here nga present value daw sa lease payment amounts substantially. Substantially, okay, na tayo spelling. On all of the fair value of the underlying asset at the inception of the lease. Again, inception ang igamit ha. Take note of that. So meaning, di ba sa agreement, if mubasa mo contract, di ba ma-determine naman na ito if pila ang bayaran ni lessee kay lessor. So, ma-determine mo adto, you'll compute the present value. Now, si PFRS 16, wa sa siya giingon, same as PA 17. Wa siya gi-state if when can we say that substantially or almost close dito sa fair value sa underlying asset. So, if ang presyo sa asset nga giabangan, let's say 100,000. Okay, say 100,000. So, ang gibayad or ang present value sa lease payment amounts substantially all of the fair value. Meaning, duol kaayo sa 100,000 to the point nga mura na siya imong gipalit bisag wa jud. Now, wala gi-mention nga rolling or provision si PFRS 16. But si US GAAP naa. Ingon siya, at least 90% of the fair value of the leased asset ang katong payment. So, applying that, if atong i-compute, sa example na to ganina, 100K, okay, that is the fair value of the underlying asset, kana, times 90%, okay, that's pila? 90,000. Muna imong lease payment. So imagine, ang present value ang gibayaran ni lessee sa imo is 90,000 minimum. Pila ang fair value? 100,000. So here, we could see nga, ang iyang gibayad is so close sa fair value nga halos iya na jud gipalit ang asset. So you cannot classify it as operating lease. Because as you're aware, di ba? Adto sa lessee accounting, na ay two optional criteria or exception nga pwede nimo gamiton ang operating lease. And if you remember, ang giingon didto is low value ang underlying asset and at the same time short period or less than a year. So, if you notice, mura ra pud siya inana dire, di ba? There is operating lease less than a year, then renewable na lang, then low value. Pero, diri man good, you cannot say that this is low value because imagine 100K times 90%, close na kaayo. So, dili na ni siya low value. Thus, you need to classify it under finance lease. Now, these are the major criteria. Okay? So, if mo-fall siya sa 1, 2, 3, and 4, you classify it already as finance lease or mo use na kag finance lease model. However, aside from these, there are still other criteria that may lead to finance lease classification. Upat sa ni sila, kaninas mabaw. Number 1, the underlying asset is specialized in nature that only lessee can use it without major modifications. So, for example, naay businessman. Niya isa siya ka power distributor, like si Beko inana. Now, na siya gipang abangan ng mga specialized assets nga gi-use only for distribution of power or electricity. And sa kagrabe ka specialized, it was not even manufactured here in the Philippines. Rather, imported siya from, let's say, Japan. So, here, we can imply that katong nga assets, it cannot be used by other entrepreneurs or businesses because intended raman siya for companies nga mga power distributor. So, specialized in nature ang mga asset nga imong giabangan. Like, tower baron, or unsa pa na nga cables, the like, nga only the lessee can use it without major modification. That asset cannot be used by normal businesses. Like, for example, mga manufacturing or mining, di pwede. Because specialized siya for that power distributor and without major modification. So, if na inana nga nature, it may lead to the finance lease classification. Number 2, if the lessee can cancel the okay. Number 2, if the lessee can cancel the lease. So, okay, dangon tani, stop na to ni ang contract at the discretion of the lessee. And the lessor's losses are borne by the lessee. So if naay losses, shouldered siya sa lessee. Because of course, part of those losses is di na nimo mapaabangan sa uban. Because, di ba, you had an agreement with lessee nga abangan to niya. So karon if na kay loss nga ma-incur, siya ang mo shoulder. This is one of the criteria sad para ma-use nimo ang finance lease model. Number 3, gain or loss in the change in fair value of residual accrues to the lessee. Meaning, si lessee ang naka-benefit sa gain or else siya ang mo-shoulder sa loss. So still, classified under finance lease. And number 4, lessee has the ability to continue the lease for secondary period at rent lower than the market rent. So for example, ikay lessor, and then gitagaan nimo ang lessee og secondary period. So murag renewal inana. But upon renewal, imong gi-offer nga rent is lower than kung unsay normal rate sa market. So syempre, suki na nimo, di ba? So barato na. If inana, kani nga mga criteria, kaning 1, 2, 3, and 4, these may lead to the classification of finance lease model. Therefore, if in case wala ni fall anha sa 4 general classifications plus sa 4 other criteria, we classify it as operating lease. And that's what we are going to talk in this report. I just included this para comprehensive, di ba? When can we say nga kani siya finance lease? Once at makaingon nga it is an operating lease. So, there. We're done with topic 1. I hope you've learned a lot. So, for topic 2, I'm gonna give you to Miss Evangeline Aureo.
Now, let's go to lease of land and building. Ari taon na sa babaw. So, in classifying whether the lease is a finance lease or an operating lease, kay ang abangan man nato kay land and building. So, at the inception of the lease, i-classify nato whether finance lease ba siya or operating lease. When a lease includes both land and building elements, a lessor assesses the classification of each element as a finance lease or operating lease separately. I-consider nato na these are two separate elements, ang land o ang building. I-separate nato una ang land and building before classifying whether finance lease ba siya or operating lease. That is the number 1 consideration. Separate the two elements. Second consideration kay kaning lease payment. Ang lease payments kay katuning bayaran ni lessee kang lessor kay i-allocate ang gibayad ni lessee kang lessor to the relative fair value of the leasehold interest in the land and building at the inception of the lease. So for example, no, ang land kay naay 1 million. Ang building pod kay naay 2 million na fair value. Total of 3 million. Then, ang lease payment kay 100,000. So, ang giingon, separate the two elements. So, kaning 100,000 nga lease payment, i-allocate ni siya kay land o kay building. Ang pangutana, pila man ka land and pila man pud ka building. So, ang mahitabo, i-allocate nimo ang lease payments based on sa relative fair value ni land o ni building. So, ang fair value ni land kay 1 million. Ang fair value ni building kay 2 million. A total of 3 million. So, 1 million over 3 million. So, that is 1 over 3. Kang building kay 2 million over 3 million. So, that is 2 over 3. Sunod kay, i-allocate na nimo ang 100,000 nga lease payment. So, 100,000 times 1 over 3, that is 33,333 for the land. Then, sa building, 100,000 times 2 over 3, that is 66,667. Nanao na to pag-allocate ang lease payment sa land of building. But what if the lease payments cannot be allocated reliably? So, cannot be allocated reliably, meaning dili nimo ma-determine ang separate fair value ni land o building. Kumbaga, package na jud siya. Kauban na silang duha. So, by default, finance lease ang iyang classification, finance lease, unless it is clear that both the elements are operating lease. So, kung clear jud siya at the inception of the lease na operating lease siya, edi i-classify nato siya as operating lease. Pero kung dili, gamiton nato ang finance lease if the lease payment cannot be allocated reliably. Third consideration, if the land element is immaterial to the lessee, then treat it as a single unit for lease classification. Kung immaterial daw ang land, ang amount sa land niya, i-classify na nato siya whether it is a finance lease or an operating lease, i-treat na lang nato siya as a single unit na lang, as a land and building. Dili na separate two elements. So, unsa may accounting treatment ani? So, the single lease payment is classified as a finance lease or an operating lease, applying the classification criteria for lessor. So, i-combine na nato siya, land and building. And then, tan-awon na lang nato at the inception of the lease if unsa iyang na-meet na criteria. Kung na-meet niya ang criteria for finance lease ang atuang classification. Otherwise, operating lease. In such a case, the economic life of the building is regarded as the economic life of the entire underlying asset. So that is for lease of land and building.
Right. To continue the discussion of our topic, so let us now go to operating lease model. So this is a lessor's point of view. Right. Now, again, under operating lease, so wala transfer of ownership of the underlying asset from the lessor to the lessee. Okay. Now to begin, let us talk about first kung unsa ni si escalation clause. Now, can you see escalation clause actually is this is a sort of condition stated in the lease contract na at a certain point in time, so during the lease term, is na ay increase, like mo increase bayron no ni lessee nga sa rent adto kang lessor. Alright? So, no worries, Kai. Later on, as we progress our discussion, so naray mga examples and in order for you to understand even better. Alright? Now, let's go to lease payments. So, see, IFRS 16, so si standard, nag-provide sa kang lessor under operating lease nga ang gamiton daw is si straight line basis or si other systematic basis. But then ang default good is si straight line basis. Okay? Now I know that you're all very familiar with the straight line basis already, because oftentimes we are also using this one, like the straight line method in depreciation. So this is very easy. That's just a piece of cake for you guys. I know that. Okay, especially kung fixed ang bayron nun or fixed ang rental payment nga ibayad ni lessee sa kang lessor annually. Like fixed ang rental payment nga ma-receive ni lessor sa kang lessee every year. Like say for example, 3-year ang lease term, and then annually mag-receive si lessor of 10,000 rental payment sa kang lessee. So that would be 10,000 every year for 3 years. So that is straight line already. So it's just very easy to account for that. Now, what if kung dili siya equal, like lahi-lahi ang madawat ni lessor nga rental payment from lessee every year? Like sa akong giingon ganina, na-increase, so na-escalation. So how are we going to account for that one? Right, I will give you an example here. So again, say for example nga ang lease term is 3 years. Okay, now so year 1, so ang annual rental payment na receive ni lessor is say 10,000, and then sa year 2, the increase man siya, so you went up to 20,000. And now for year 3, another increase, so the increase na po siya into 30,000. Now, how are we going to account for this one using straight line basis? Now, easy peasy. So just add up all these 3. Now, the total of this one, you just have to divide it with the lease term, which is 3 years. Now, kung imo ning i-add silang tolo, so that would be 60,000. 60,000. So divided by 3. So ang result ano niya? So mauna na siya ang i-account ni lessor lease payments over the lease term. Okay? Right, now let us move on to the recognition. So, kanos ang mag-recognize? Once ang recognize, kanos ang mag-record si lessor. Okay, so during the inception period, so katong like nagsabot si lessor o si lessee, rent si lessee sa property ni lessor. So at that time wala pa to i-recognize si lessor, right? Kaya wala pa mo to siya na-receive or wala pa siya nadawat. Now, the time nga i-exercise na, like sa commencement date na, na-exercise ni lessee ang right of use sa asset ni lessor. So that would be the time nga mag-recognize si lessor o mag-record sa iyang book. Alright? So, I know nga sayo na po kayo sa inyo ang recognition journalizing kay nangaraan naman ni, right? So during the commencement date, so kung nagbayad si lessee sa kang lessor, so just simply debit cash. So kung naka-receive si lessor of cash, and then ang amount kung pilang yang receive. Now, ang iyahang i-credit is ang rent income. So, dilap to iyahang nadawat, yung na-receive. So, amount to iyahang ibutang there is amount. And then, kung receivable dyan siya, like dili cash ang na-receive ni lessor. So, just simply debit the rent receivable kung pilay amount, and then still you have to credit the rental income and then the amount, right? Okay, now let's go to the depreciation of lease asset. So here, take note nga is under operating lease, so walay transfer of ownership. So the asset still belongs to the lessor. So si lessor mag-recognize siya of depreciation. Now, unsa may gamiton ni lessor i-depreciate niya sa asset. Now, it is stated like in a book nga sa depreciation policy, so i-depreciate ni lessor sa asset. So, ang depreciation shall be consistent with the lessor's normal depreciation for a similar asset. So, ang pag-depreciate ni lessor is the same as the regular PPE and investment property. Though mag-matter siya kung unsa nga model ang iyahang gigamit. Okay? Now let's move on to initial direct cost. Now, unsa ba is initial direct cost? So, kaning say initial direct cost, these are costs nga directly attributable sa pag-execute sa lease contract. So, for example, processing cost. So, ang nagasto ni lessor sa pag-execute sa contract. Alright. Now, unsa may treatment ni initial direct cost? So, here, the initial direct cost is added to the carrying amount of the lease asset, and then it will be recognized as expense over the lease term, right? So later on is naapoy illustration or examples ani aron mas masabtan din siya, right? Now let us go to the security asset. security deposit. So in summary, it's a security deposit. Alright. A simple example sa security deposit is magpalit ka something to drink outside niya ang bottle is kanang dapat imo siyang iuli. So pagpalit nimo magbayad ka or maghatag kag security deposit. So just in case nga dili nimo mauli ang bottle, so katong deposit nga imong gihatag didto is silbi mao na to siya bayad, dili na to mauli sa imuha if dili nimo iuli ang bottle. Alright? So when it comes to leasing food, like for instance, ako mag-rent ko o balay. So magbayad ko sa kang lessor o security deposit. Dayon ang kanang security deposit is liability na siya ni lessor sa akoa. Like at the end of the lease term or at the expiration of the lease, kay dapat iuli na siya ni lessor sa akoa. With the condition nga sa ako ang girentahan nga property is wala siya damage or wala siya kanang overdue nga payment nga dapat bayaran. Otherwise, those payments or those kanang damage sa property, bali ang bayad is pwede ra siya i-deduct sa security deposit na ako, and then the remaining is mao na to ang i-return ni lessor sa akoa. Okay? Now, let us go to the last one, which is the lease bonus. So, kani si lease bonus, ano niya siya? Like, for example, ako, si lessee. So, ganahan ko mo rent o say for example equipment, and then daghan kayo mistanan nga gusto mo rent sa equipment ni lessor. So in order for me to be chosen by the lessor na mo rent sa iyang equipment, so aron ako'y pilion, sana all pilion. So, mabayad ko sa kang lessor o lease bonus. Okay? Then, kani si lease bonus is i-amortize po niya siya over the lease term. So, ibayad ako sa lease bonus is ang recognition ani ni lessor is unearned po niya siya, unearned rental income. Alright? Now, in order for you guys to understand even better, so let's go to the illustration. Right. On January 1, 2020, si Simple Company is nag-purchase of machinery for 3 million cash. Ang purpose niya is for leasing. And then the machine is expected to have a 10-year life and no residual value. Okay, so the moment nga na-acquire ni Simple Company ang machinery, so the record niya is debit machinery 3 million, and then since nagpagawa siya og cash, so mag-credit siya og cash 3 million. Alright? Now, pag April 1, 2020, si Simple Company kay iyahan ang parentahan ang machine nga iyahang gipalit to another entity. Kunya ang lease term is 3 years. Kunya ang monthly rental is 50,000. Yeah, payable siya at the beginning of every month. Right, so at year end, like in December 31, 2020, so I recognize ni simple company or ni lessor nga income is amounting to 450,000. So pag April man nagsugod ang like nag-rent ang another entity. So from April to December, so that would be 9 months. So ang monthly rent is 50,000. So 50,000 times 9, so that's 450,000. So just simply debit cash nga for 50 and then credit rent income nga for 50,000. Alright, next is on April 1, 2020, si Simple Company nag-receive og security deposit nga 600,000 to be refunded upon the lease expiration. So, as what I have said earlier nga kani si security deposit is liability ni siya ni lessor. So, Simple Company as a lessor, so naa siya liability nga iuli ni sakang another entity ang security deposit later on at the lease expiration. But then that moment or that time nga na-receive ni Simple Company ang 600,000. So i-account na niya. So naka-receive man siya og cash. So Simple Company will have to debit cash 600,000 and then credit liability for rent deposit nga 600,000. Okay, now let's move on to number 4. So in addition to the rental, si Simple Company received from the lessee a lease bonus of 120,000 by January 1, 2020. So yeah, so before pa ang commencement date, so nagbayad na si another entity kang Simple Company og lease bonus. Now again, kani si lease bonus is i-amortize siya over the lease period. So pag-receive ni Simple Company sa lease bonus, so mag-record siya debit siya cash since naka-receive man siya og cash. So debit cash 120,000 and then ang yahay credit is unearned rent income nga 120,000. Right, next is pag April 1, 2020, si Simple Company is nagbayad sa initial direct cost na ang amount is 300,000. Now, such costs are directly attributable to negotiating and arranging the operating lease. So again, once again, ito si initial direct cost. So, the initial direct cost is recognize siya as expense over the lease term, right? Now, pagbayad ani ni Simple Company, since naka-incur man siya og initial direct cost sa pag-negotiate o pag-arrange sa operating lease. So, ang iyahang i-record is debit deferred initial direct cost niya 300,000 and since nakapagawas mo siya cash, so Simple Company will have to credit cash 300,000. Next is during the year, si simple company is nakabayad siya repair. So repair and maintenance nga 20,000. So ang iyang record is mag-debit siya repair and maintenance na 20,000, and then since nakapagawas mo siya cash, bayad siya cash. So credit cash nga 20,000. Now next is the lease bonus. So assuming end of the year na. So the lease bonus, as I have said earlier, is the amortized over the lease period. Now a lease period is 3 years. Now si 120,000 kung imuha siyang i-divide by 3 years, so ang monthly amortization sa lease bonus would be 40,000. Yeah, that's 40,000 annually. Now, since April naman i-commence ang pag-rent sa another entity, so that would be April to December, so that's 9 months. So 40,000 times 9 over 12. So mao ni siya diri nga na ay 30,000. So ang record ni simple company sa iha na receive nga lease bonus is debit check and rent income 30, and then mag-credit siya og rent income nga 30,000. Alright, now let's go to the depreciation. So the machinery is depreciated over 10 years or 300,000 annually, right? So using the straight line method, so ang cost sa machinery is 3 million here. Now divided by 10 years, since 10 year man ang iyang life and no residual value. So mao na nga ay annual depreciation na 300,000. So since this is an operating lease, so it's a simple company, is may recognize siya depreciation. So just simply debit depreciation 300,000 and then credit accumulated depreciation 300,000. Now lastly, say initial direct cost. So the initial direct cost again is recognized as expense over the lease term. So here, si simple company, so mag-recognize siya of initial direct cost. Now, ang iyang record is mag-debit siya og amortization of initial direct cost nga 75,000, and then mag-credit siya og deferred initial direct cost nga 75,000. Now, kiunsa may pagkuha sa 75,000. Now, take note nga si initial direct cost nga na-incur is 300,000 here on April 1, 2020. So, nakabayad si simple company of direct cost nga 300,000. Now, ang kani siyang 300,000 is that would be amortized over 3 years. So 3 years man ang lease term. So 300,000 would be divided into the lease term, 3 years. And then since April man commence rent sa another entity, so that would be 9 months from April to December. So 300,000 divided by 3 times 9/12. So that's why we have here 75,000. Alright. Now it is stated here in the balance of the deferred initial cost. Initial direct cost shall be presented as an addition to the carrying amount of the machinery. Alright. Now that's all for the illustration. Now let's go to the other illustration. So the A company leased an office space to another entity for a 3-year period beginning January 1, 2020. Now under the terms of the operating lease, so rent for the first year is 1 million and rent for the next 2 years would be 1,250,000 annually. So maon ni ganina katong atong giingon nga na escalation clause. So dili siya pareha ang rent nga madawat ni lessor annually, right? So first term here 1 million, and then sa next 2 years kay 3-year man lease term, lease period. So for the next 2 years, ang ma-receive ni lessor ni A company would be 1,250, 1,250,000 for the next 2 years. Now, however, as an inducement to enter the lease, so A granted the lessee the first 6 months of the lease, so rent-free. So 6 months is granted siya as free. Now, to compute for this one, so about 2020, so that's the first year, right? So stated here nga 1 million ang annual rent na ma-receive ni lessor ni A company for the first year. But then it was also stated here that the first 6 months would be less rent-free. So rent-free months is 6 months, so 6 months na lang ang mayroon nun ni lessee. So that would be 1 million times 6/12. So it is 500,000 na lang. Now it's a 2021. So again, stated here nga for the next 2 years, escalate siya from 1 million to 1,250,000 for the next 2 years. So here, for the second year, 1,250,000, and then for the third year, we also have 1,250,000. Now, so using the straight line basis, so you just have to add up these three. Now the result, so the total rental for 3 years would be 3 million. Now, using the straight line basis, so since 3-year man ang lease period, so you have to divide 3 million by 3 years. So ang average annual rental na ma-receive ni lessor is 1 million. Now, to record that one sa book ni company, sa book ni lessor, so pag 2020, so naka-receive siya og cash, right? Naka-receive siya og cash na 500,000. And then, getting 500,000 is, diba, supposed to be maamaning 1 million ngayong ma-receive, but then rent-free man ang 6 months, so maamaning 500,000 lang yung ma-receive. And then, since ang giingon ganina using straight line basis, so ang imuhang i-record is average annual rental nga 1 million. So here you have to credit the rent income nga 1 million. So ang difference ani nila is mauna siya si rent receivable nga 500,000. Right. Now sa 2021, so again, ang rent niya for 2021 is for the second year is 1,250,000. So ni-escalate siya to 1,250,000. So pag second year is nag-receive si company og cash nga 1,250,000. So sa iyang book mag-debit siya og cash nga 1,250,000. Now sa may i-credit. So ang iyang i-credit is again si rent income na 1 million. Now remembering we have to account using straight line basis. So ang rent income, so it must be the same every year. Now ang difference ani niya, so again mao ni si rent receivable nga 250,000, right? So yes, here, so si rent income for 2020 and 2021 ay 2 million siya, and then rent collected is 500,000 plus 1,250,000, so a total of 1,750,000. Now ang difference is what I've said, mauni si rent receivable 250,000. Now for 2022, again, ibayad ni other entity is 1,250,000 na rent. So mag-debit si company, si lessor of cash na 1,250,000, and then again si rent income na 1 million credit, and then again credit nga rent receivable 250,000. Right. Okay, so this is the end of this illustration.
For application, problem 1. On January 1, 2020, Vim Company purchased an equipment for $3 million cash for the purpose of leasing it. The machine is expected to have a 10-year life from the date of purchase. On April 1, 2020, the equipment was leased to Eloisa Company for a 3-year period at the monthly rental of $40,000 payable at the end of every month. Additionally, Eloisa Company paid $120,000 to Vim Company on April 1, 2020 as a lease bonus. Vim Company repairs of $20,000 relating to 2020. Required number 1, prepare journal entries on the books of the lessor following the operating lease model, and number 2, compute the net rent income of the lessor. So, ang atong unahon kay ang requirement number 1, journal entries for the books of the lessor. So, first na nato na entry kay ang acquisition of equipment pag January 1, 2020 worth of 3 million. So, debit equipment 3 million, credit cash 3 million. Second nato na entry kay ang rent income. So, debit cash na 360,000, credit rent income na 360,000. So, why 360,000? So, 40,000 man ang monthly nga rent times 9 months kay from April 1 to December 31, 2020. So, 40,000 times 9 equals 360,000. Sunod na to na entry, katulong entry kay lease bonus na 120,000. So, debit cash 120,000, credit unearned rent income 120,000. The next kay ang repairs nga 20,000. So, debit repairs na 20,000, credit cash nga 20,000. Sunod kay the lease bonus is amortized over 3 years nga lease term. Debit unearned rent income, then credit rent income worth of 30,000. So why 30,000? So 120 divide 3 years equals 40,000. 40,000 nga annual amortization, but nag-start man siya April 1, 2020, so to December, so 9 months na siya. 120,000 divide 3 years times 9 over 12, that is 30,000. So tara, 120 divide 3 years equals 40,000 times 9 divide 12. Next kay ang depreciation. Debit depreciation of 30,000 and accumulated depreciation nga 300,000. 300,000. So, how do we get 300,000? Simply, 3 million divided by 10 years nga expected life niya. Note that the depreciation is from the date of acquisition, which is January 1, 2020, and not from April 1, 2020, the date of lease. The reason is that the equipment is acquired for leasing purposes and already available for intended use, meaning for rental na siya from January 1, 2020. Idle property is subject to depreciation as long as it is available for the intended use. So, mao ni siya ang entries for Vim Company. Mao ni siya dito. Then, second requirement kay compute the net rent income of the lessor for 2020. So, rent income equals 390,000. 390,000 kay 360,000 nga katong 9 months nga rent income plus 30,000 nga amortize sa katong lease bonus equals 390,000. I-less ang repairs 20,000 plus less pa jud ang depreciation. So 320. So 390,000 minus 320 equals 70,000 nga net income ni Vim Company for 2020.
Okay, so to continue with the application problems. So I have here the problem 12-6. So Manila Company is engaged in leasing heavy equipment. Now on December 1, 2020, the entity bought a second-hand heavy equipment for 375,000. And in December 2020, the entity incurred 75,000 for a major overhaul to put the equipment in good running condition. Now the equipment is available for the intended use on December 31, 2020. And the equipment has an estimated useful life of 5 years. And then the depreciation is on a straight line basis. Now on April 1, 2021, si Manila Company leased the equipment to Makati Company for 2 years up to March 31, 2023. Now the lease fee is 15,000 per month, and then Makati Company paid 180,000 on April 1, 2021. So it is the lease fee for 1 year. Now during 2021, Manila Company spent 7,000 for minor repairs and 3,000 for transportation of the equipment to Makati Company. Now requirement is to prepare journal entries on the books of the lessor for 2020 and 2021. So here, the journal entries of 2020. So, pagpalit ni Manila Company sa heavy equipment pag December 1, 2020. So, ang entries ani would be equipment. So, debit equipment 375,000, and then credit cash 375,000. And then next one is for December 2020 gihapon is naka-incur si Manila Company og 75,000 for major overhaul to put the equipment in good running condition. So kaning 75,000, so added siya sa cost sa equipment because it is a major overhaul sa equipment aron mo run siya in good condition. So ang entry again, debit equipment 75,000, and then credit cash nga 75,000. Alright. Next is pag 2021. So pag 2021, naka-incur si Makati Company of 180,000 para ibayad sa Manila Company. Now at the book of the lessor sa Manila Company nga book, so mag-recognize siya og cash nga 180,000 rental payment ni Makati Company for 1 year. So debit cash nga 180,000, so ang credit would be the rent income na 180,000. Okay. Next is repairs. So since naka-incur man si Manila Company of 7,000 na minor repairs niya, 3,000 nga transportation sa equipment para maadto siya ka Makati Company. So debit nga repair 7,000 and another debit nga transportation 3,000, and then a credit would be cash na 10,000. Next is the depreciation. So ang gingon diri is we have to use the straight line basis sa depreciation. Now, yun sa may pagwa si 90,000. So here, cost sa machine or sa equipment is 450,000 yeah, divided by sa useful life na 5 years. Right. So, mao nang na ay 90,000. So, kanina si 450 is mao ni si 375 here. The second hand siya papalit niya mo na yung price. And then, katong cost sa overhaul sa machine niya, 75,000. So, i-add silang doon. So, mo ni siya 450,000. Alright. Next is si rent income of 45,000. Yun sa mga pagkuha si rent income 45,000. So here, an earned rent income nga 15,000. You times you have 3. So that's why we have here rent income of 5,000 and then credit nga unearned rent income 45,000. Alright, so that is all for my part. Thank you for listening for a bit of a small presentation of mine.
Next, for the last portion of the application. So, this is in connection no sa focal point sa amo ang report, the operating lease sa point of view ni lessor. So, we have problem 12-8. On October 1, 2020, Dean Company leased office space at a monthly rental of 300,000 for 10 years, expiring September 30, 2030. As an inducement for Dean Company to enter the lease, the lessor permitted Dean Company to occupy the premises rent-free from October 1 to December 31, 2020. Okay, so in this scenario, si Dean Company nangabang siya og office space. Okay? When man? Nag-start siya pag October 1, 2020 with a monthly rental of 300,000 for 10 years. So, kay 10 years man, mag-expire siya September 30, 2030. Okay? Now, para entice si Dean Company nga mo-enter sa lease contract. So, niingon si lessor nga, sige, tagaan ti kag pakulo. So, from October 1 to December 31, 2020, rent-free. Okay? Why bayad? Now, the requirement is prepare journal entries on the books of the lessor for 2020, 2021, and the last year 2030. Okay. So, first entry is on the year 2020. Okay? Itong entry is debit ta og rent receivable, credit, rent income. Now, at what amount? Amount is 877,500. Okay? So, diin man tagikan anang 877,500. Well, we'll do the computation first. So, atong total rent is pila man di ay? Hindi ba 10 years man to? 10 years. Unya kay naamay kuan. Naamay 3 months nga rent free. So atong ma-generate nga rent income din ha is 9 years and 7 months na lang. So 9 years and 7 months, if ato na siyang i-convert, that's 117 remaining months. Okay? So na lang tayo 117 nga remaining. And then 117 nga remaining months times ila to iyahang monthly 300,000. Okay. That's 35,100,000. Therefore, ang imuha daing total rent sa point of view ni lessor, nga imuhang ma-generate nga rent income sa whole gyud nga kaning lease contract is 35,100,000. Now, pila man ang annual? Okay. So, ang annual is 35,110,000 over 10 years. Okay, 10 years man to. That's 3,510,000. Okay. So, 3,510,000, that's your annual rent. Yung ma-receive. Now, for the first period, na natay annual, kung ano to ang sa year 2020. Okay? For the first period is, ang atong i-compute, rent from October 1 to December 31. Because, nag-start siya og abang October 1 naman. So, that's 3 months. Therefore, 3,510,000 times 3 over 12. Okay? And that's 877,500. That's why mao ni ato ang entry. So sa first period, recognize ta og debit rent receivable 877,500 and credit rent income 877,500. Okay. Next, that's it. For the year 2021. Next requirement for the year 2021. Debit ta og cash 3,600,000 because 300,000 times 12. Okay? For the whole year. So that's 3,600,000. Credit, rental income, katong annual, 3,510,000 and credit rent receivable nga 90,000. Next is for the last period, the year 2030. So here we debit cash 2,700,000. Anong 2,700,000 man? Because di ba last year na ni? And according sa problem, sa man to, dara, 10 years, expiring. September 30, 2030. So, mag-expire siya September 30. So, from January to September 30, sa last year, that's only 9 months. So, therefore, 300,000 ngay imuhang monthly payment times 9, and that's 2.7 million. Okay? So, debit cash, 2,700,000, and then credit rent income nga pila man? 2,632,500 because katong annual na to nga nakuha kani 3,510,000 times 9/12. Okay, 9 months man. So, imuhang rental income is 2,632,500. And then, credit also, rent receivable nga 67,500. Okay? So, that's it. Mao na siya ato ang entries sa perspective ni lessor for the year 2020, 2021, and 2030 of Dean Company.
For the chapter summary, a lessor classifies a finance lease either a finance lease or an operating lease. A finance lease transfers substantially all the risk and rewards incidental to ownership of an underlying asset, while an operating lease does not transfer substantially all the risk and rewards incidental to ownership of an underlying asset. When can we say that a lease is a finance lease? Indicators of finance lease. First, there is a transfer of ownership at the end of the lease term. Second, lessee has an option to purchase the asset. Third, lease term is a major part of asset's economic life. Major part means at least 75% of economic life of an asset. Fourth, present value of lease payment is substantially all of the fair value. Substantially all means at least 90% of the fair value of the lease asset. These four major criteria are determinative in nature, meaning any one of these would result to the classification of lease into finance lease. Next. In land and building lease, a lessor separates the two elements, land and building. The lease payment is allocated to the relative fair value of the leasehold interest in the land and building elements. And if it cannot be allocated reliably between the two elements, then it is classified as finance lease. In operating lease, lessor recognizes lease payments as lease income over the lease term using straight-line basis or another systematic basis. The underlying remains as an asset of the lessor since normally nagpaabang raman dyan siya and there is no transfer of ownership and at the end of the lease term. And also, the lessor bears all ownership or executory costs. Initial direct cost, lessor capitalizes the initial direct cost to the carrying amount of the underlying asset and recognizes those costs as an expense over the lease term on the same basis as the lease term, either straight line basis or another systematic basis. Security deposit. Lessor recognizes a security deposit received from the lessee as a payable. It is a liability on the part of the lessor and an asset on the part of the lessee. Kay ang kaning security deposit kay at the end of the lease term sa lessee kay if ever ang underlying asset is walay damage and all the rent is paid na kay uli ni lessor sa kang lessee. That is why sa part ni lessor kay liability ni siya. Next is lease bonus. Lessor accounts for a lease bonus as an unearned income and recognize it as income over the lease term on the same basis as the lease income. Kay either katong straight line basis or another systematic basis. And that would be all for chapter 12. Thank you.